Warning, incoming game over. Warning, incoming game over.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Game Over Ottawa. Maude here once again, joined by Louis of the Zubcast. How are you doing tonight, Louis?
I'm not doing too bad. I mean, could be a little better. That game was interesting for sure and did not give the most amount of stuff to cheer about, but hey, we'll get into the details.
Yeah, I always ask my guests how they're doing first thing, and then the answer always hinges on what the result of the game was, pretty much. So, the Bruins shutting out the Ottawa Senators 2-0. The Sens not able to pull off that empty net magic that they were able to manage last week against the Boston Bruins on Saturday. So that's the story of the game here is two straight shutouts over 120 minutes of game time for the Ottawa Senators with no goals. And I had planned our second segment here today to be why can't the Sens score lately? It's feeling even more poignant after that. So before we really get into that, we'll talk a little bit about what actually happened like moment to moment in this game. First off, I'll say, how do you feel about getting shut out by Joonas Korpisalo?
Man, that's bleak. That my
So
I was
predictable
watching
though, right?
yes, for real. Like I was watching the game with my dad, and the whole way through he was like, "Please, can we just not get shut out by Corpusal? Please don't let it happen." And we were going into this I had exchanged a few uh stats with you before the game, and we were talking about the Corpusalo Forsberg comparison, and it was looking bleak. It was not looking good, and sure enough. One goal combined from both teams on both of those goalies. That's unreal. And yeah, it sucks. It's the most Sens thing of all time. Um, yeah, I mean, gotta hand it to him. He played decent. The Sens
Hmm.
did technically, if you want to say, they beat him, but the refs kind of
That is true.
lost sight of the puck, which unbelievable to me. Like that, it seemed like I think it was Furlat who had the view there from the goal line. But how do you miss the puck? Just it's there. You have the angle.
I think
I
that's my main takeaway for tonight too, is that even though they did get shut out, they didn't play great overall. It should have been 1-1 in that third period there just because of the quick whistle with Tim Stützle. And it's funny because Tim Stützle had that goal against Pittsburgh where, to be honest, on all of the replays, I still never saw where the puck was before he poked it through Nedeljkovic. And that goal stood because the referee did a great job of waiting to blow the whistle because somehow him and Tim Stützle were both able to see it. And then we get the exact opposite scenario here today where it was really obviously loose and the referee doesn't see it. It's frustrating too because I think there is a rule where if the player is in the act of shooting the loose puck when the whistle goes, they can allow it to stand. They can overturn it and say, well, I did blow the whistle, but he was already shooting the puck, so it'll count. And I feel like this was really close to being that, but they couldn't quite say it because Stützle was kind of diving for the puck as the whistle went. He was in the act of going for the puck, but it wasn't technically mid-shot, right? So I feel like that was
yeah.
just really unfortunate there, where if the whistle had gone even just like half a second later, like as Stützle's stick was touching the puck, they might have actually been able to allow that goal. But just no luck for the Sens here tonight. They also hit the post or crossbar 3 times, I believe it was. I think it was Giroux, Batherson, and Clevin all had, they weren't like high danger scoring chances, but shots where they did beat Korpisalo pretty cleanly. So I feel like a little bit of puck luck would have gone a long way tonight in a game that was 1-0 until the dying moments.
That Clevin one especially was crazy because we were buzzing during that penalty kill. Like Matthew Highmore was out for it seemed like a minute and a half, but doing well and not getting tired. And then Clevin had that chance. We just came in earlier. There was the whole Greg takeaway, and then he somehow absorbed that hit. I don't remember if it was from who because it was on the power play, so Zadorov wouldn't have been on. It may have been Lowry, but he absorbed it, did not fall at all, and got it over to
Yeah.
Pinto.
I couldn't believe
That
he stayed
was
on his skates there. That
yeah.
was insane.
Yeah, because I was following the puck on the original play, and then they showed the replay. I was like, oh my god, he didn't fall. That's unreal. Like
Hmm.
he did not have the size advantage there at all. He was really able to observe it. It was good use of his lower body gravity, but Yeah,
Yeah.
it's unlucky with all the posts.
I feel like
Crazy,
that penalty kill specifically was probably one of the high points in this game for the Sens, which sucks to
easily.
say, but in a game where you don't score, that's how it's going to be. Is that if you are going to have any great moments, it's going to be near misses or defensive plays. So at least we can say a thumbs up to the penalty kill here tonight. And yeah, that shot by Clevin too. I was surprised that it was that good of a shot. Korpisalo just barely got a piece of it, so we can give him some credit on that one. I would think that if that didn't hit Korpisalo's glove, it was probably going to go in. He got just enough of it to make it hit the post, and so credit to him on that one. But overall, I don't think that the Sens made it difficult enough for Korpisalo here tonight. Like, yeah, it's the revenge game. Yeah, he shuts out his former team, and he played solid. He wasn't bad by any means, but and this is something that I've said about the Sens a lot this season, is it was a lot of shots from far out, a lot of one and done chances where no one gets to the rebound, and I feel like they just didn't do enough of a job of making it difficult for Korpisalo here tonight. Like, you had Brady crashing the net a decent amount, but he was never getting those rebounds. He wasn't getting any deflections either, so it was it was on the easier side for a shutout for Korpisalo, I'd say.
Yeah, and like it goes we right now on natural stat trick, you're looking at flurry adjusted expected goals. I have the Sens at 1.7,
Oh
which is
God.
awful. So like let's say that goal counted that got whistled early, like you wouldn't even expect them to get more than that based on their chances. And that's
Yeah, and
sad.
when I think about the scoring chances in this game, or just the shots in general that the Sens had, like, I don't even know what other chances other than Stützle with the quick whistle. I don't know what other chances would even like make up those expected goals for. Like, I don't know what other plays you could really expect a goal from the Sens here tonight, apart from any play where you could have just like asked for a better shot to beat the goalie cleanly. But it doesn't always work that way.
Yeah, like I'm trying to look at individual plays here. You have 20% chance of scoring towards the end of the first from Stützle with a slap shot. Well, yeah, that's true. There was the one where he cut in, got kind of tripped. I think that was in the second though, and
Right,
fell and
right.
still got a good shot off.
There
Um,
was also one where I think it was off the rush. The pass came from the left side, and Corpusalo came across the crease to stop Stützle as well. I think that was in the first
yes,
period.
that's the one. Yeah, that's the one here. And like there was another play. I know people want Stützle to shoot more, and I do too. But there was one play that was almost beautiful. I think it was probably the best that the offense looked, and it was in the first. And I believe it was just at 5-on-5 because Cousins was on with the other player with the other high profile players. And it was like Cousins got it over to Shabbat, who tapped it over to Giroud, who, or it wouldn't have been Giroud, it would have been the other defenseman, fired it along the side to Stützle, who then tried to one tap it again to Batherson, which would have been an easy tap in. And man, like they were zipping. The passes were going super quickly, just absolutely cutting up the Bruins defense, and they just never got even close to that the rest of the game.
That seems to be what the Sens have been going for mostly on offense lately, is those like complex passing plays where it takes a couple of really good passes to actually generate a chance. And the thing is that when they're not on, it just ends up looking like some really ugly hockey, because then there's a lot of passes that aren't clean, that they're in the skates, they're bouncing over the guy's stick. There, I forget when it was. I think it was in the second period. We had a decent stretch of possession. I don't remember which forward line was out there, but it was Sabrango and Matt and Paolo on defense, and it was just like a good amount of zone time. But every pass that the Sens made was just totally off, where it's like, yeah, the guy got the puck, but it's either fumbled and he has to spin around and get it, or it bounces over to the boards, he has to try to recover it, or it's in the guy's skates. So it's just it feels like a matter of execution. That's the problem, but it's also just these plays that I feel like are low percentage, where it's like, how often are you really going to pull off those great passes to thread the needle and find the guy, right?
Yeah, and that's the thing. I had to we had to stop ourselves from talking too much in the Zoom
Yeah.
before, and this is essentially what I was gonna get into is that aside from that first half of the first period, the Sens, I think anyway, I don't have the data on it, and I'd have to go check. Seemed to dominate in terms of zone time for sure. As we said, their expected goals were super low, and they did end up with the edged shots, but it wasn't really driving a ton. And
hmm
they were playing, I think, what I like to call, or not what I like to call, but I took actually it's one of my books that I use as a mic stand from Daryl Belfry. Belfry Hockey talks a lot about um, offensive zone defense. And that's essentially being really good at recovering shots and putting yourself in a position to kill any sort of breakouts. And I think that really did help the Sens in a way. Like, yes, they were able to control the puck, not to create any chances with it at all, but at least keep it in the zone. And that brought the offense that the Bruins could generate way low because they couldn't break the puck out and they couldn't quite recover as many shots as they wanted to. And I think that's maybe one of the only bright spots you can take from their offensive zone play. The problem is that doesn't help you in any way when you're losing because you're like, sure, theoretically it should drive more offense. But as soon as you get that puck back, if you can't do anything with it, then you're not getting anywhere, right? So yes, it's something good to step off from and hopefully move up. And once you can get everything together, they're really going to click like they were against Boston last time. But it's definitely something to look at and to build towards to really bring all of those elements of the offensive zone together.
Yeah, I think that lines up with my eye test too, in that most of the Bruins' best chances tonight, I think, came off of their own forecheck or the Sens making turnovers in their own D zone. Not a lot of it coming off of like the Bruins' breakout itself. And it just ended up really showing in the stats with the Bruins having 12 high danger chances and the Sens only recording 4. So.
Oh,
yeah.
man, 4.
And to be honest, like I said earlier, I think I would struggle to even remember what the 4 high danger chances were tonight. Like, it's brutal. I mean, when none of them result in goals, I guess that would make it harder to remember them. But yeah, like, because even as we were saying, like, the best chances were not necessarily even shots on goal, like the post and stuff like that.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, we can give Korpisalo some credit, but the Sens really did most of the work into getting him that shutout there. Let's be quite honest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Last thing I think I want to touch on for specifically tonight's game before we get into the general topic of why the Sens can't score, which is the biggest thing to discuss here tonight, is that we did get the return of David Perron, which was a couple of months in the making. I don't think that there's like a lot to touch on how he performed specifically tonight, but I do have to say I think that he fits into this group of Sens forwards pretty well. I think he's solid on the forecheck, and he was able to get a couple of shots off tonight, I believe. And I don't know if he's going to be a difference maker for this team, getting him back like in the second half of the season here. But I feel like he does fit in really well with the style of forwards that Steve Staios has been bringing into this team for the bottom 6. And I think in the second half of the game, he did get some shifts with Stützle, I believe, because the lines just went into the blender at that point too. So I guess just any thoughts on David Perron's return tonight or what you expect to see from him going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I was not a huge fan of the signing originally when it happened. Like, it doesn't.
Me neither.
It's just an extra year was really kind of confusing me, especially after he was coming off more of a down season. The thing that I was looking at is, he's not much of a puck carrier at all. Like, last year, he played a good bit with Larkin and Raymond, who are 2 high-profile transition beasts, and so he didn't really need to get involved in anywhere, whether that's on the breakout or on entries. And I think because of that, you kind of have to play him with some sort of player that will take care of that. Otherwise, you're really not getting much movement up and down the ice. So I think somebody who's a little bit underrated in that and has also returned recently is Michael Amadio, who does a little bit of everything. So I'd like to see we didn't get to see much of them together. Originally, the third line on opening night and for the first few games before Perron's injury was Amadio, Pinto, and Perron. And I really wonder if that could turn into a really solid, maybe not completely shut down, but true 2-way third line that could bring some checking prowess. Pinto's a very underrated playmaker in my mind. I know the points haven't really been there this year, but he's got the skills to do it and has proved in previous years that he could. So I think at this point, it's really just a matter of chemistry for Perron and kind of instilling himself there, because you're playing at this point almost 50 games into a league where everybody's had time to establish themselves and get to know their teammates. And is he still single digit in games, or was that 10 today? I don't know.
It's somewhere around
brutal.
10. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see where he could fit into the lineup. I do like the idea of going back to Perron, Pinto, Amadio, specifically because they only had like 4 or 5 games of that before Perron had to take a leave of absence from the team. The only problem being it depends, I think, on how long that Josh Norris is out for, because if Josh Norris remains out of this lineup for quite a while, then who are you putting at that second line center spot is the question. I mean, maybe you just play Perron, Pinto, Amadio like a second line or something, but that probably wouldn't be too likely to
No.
happen. So yeah, it's going to be interesting going forward. Bringing in a player, it almost feels like bringing in like a deadline rental, even though we're not quite there yet, and even though they did technically have him at the beginning of the season. It's like we've barely seen anything from Perron so far, so I still feel like he's just like a wild card, like a question mark here. So I don't know, like he has had that offensive ability in the past. Obviously, he hasn't shown that yet this year with 0 points in the few games that he has played. So I do kind of wonder if he might get a bit of a look in the top 6, especially with this team being so desperate for goals. It's like you might as well just put the guy who's basically like new to the lineup at this moment, just put him in the top 6 and see if he can spark anything. But I do like your idea of reuniting that line that they originally had planned to start the season with.
Yeah, the big takeaway is just you need to give him puck carriers. Like I remember when I was writing my Sens path to the playoffs articles in the fall and doing the write up on him, it's like, yeah, that the any sort of puck carrying ability took a huge dip last year. And as a result, his full numbers came down a lot. Like his overall standings points contribution came down and all of that. So if you can give him guys that can help there, give him time to really blend together, you're really, hopefully anyway, gonna get some sort of proper chemistry going for a guy who, like, his 9 games, were those separated too? Because he had to take a leave of absence and then he got injured. Yeah, like exactly. He has had no time to get footing whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, I'm interested to see what happens. I'd love to be proven wrong for my opinion on the signing originally, and even if he doesn't end up having a huge impact this year, and I know he'll get older next season, but even just getting time with teammates on the ice in games and hopefully kind of bring that into next year as well, that could be huge, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the Sens have been missing forward depth so badly over the last few years, and that's a huge part when we can get right into it of like why their offense dries up, because if their top 2 or 3 guys aren't clicking, there's nothing else helping them.
Yeah, exactly. So hopefully David Perron can be a little bit of a boost once he gets some more games under his belt, because like you said, it was a huge gap. It was like a month long between his first few games in October and then a few games, I think, at the end of November, and then it hasn't played since then. So it's going to be interesting. At least there are some moving pieces in the Sens forward lineup to potentially be able to spark some offense. But before we get into the second segment of tonight, which is going to be taking a closer look at how the Sens are not scoring, just going to do a quick ad read for Hyperdrive Hockey. Shift into Hyperdrive and get ready to have some fun with your new source for all the biggest stories in hockey, bringing a unique style of broadcasting and commentary with a Quebecois flavor. Hyperdrive Hockey combines top-tier hockey analysis, big stories, pop culture, and a damn fun atmosphere that will drive debate, make you think, and more. Join Max, Daphne, and Kevin every Monday and Thursday for your fill on the hockey world. And they've also been posting shorter clips, little segments from the episodes the following day after the big long episode. So if you want a lighter fix to dip your toes into Hyperdrive Hockey, you can check out those clips on Tuesdays and Fridays as well. Lots of content going up on the Game Over Network YouTube channel. And you can also find the podcast on Apple, Spotify, or Amazon, or the website, thegameovernetwork.com. You can find more details there. Now, yeah, we're going to go way into it now in terms of how the Sens cannot score lately. And to kind of lead us into the segment, I'm going to pull off some of the stats that I pulled. So I think the key kind of dividing line in this season for where I'm saying that the Sens stopped scoring goals is December 1st, which is funny because their record has been way better after December 1st compared to before it. But it is 59 goals scored in 24 games since December 1st, which is the 8th worst in the entire league, and 2.46 goals for per game, despite having a 14-8-3 record now with the loss today. So obviously it's defense and goaltending keeping this team afloat, with 2.29 goals against being the 5th best. before December 1st, it was 3.13 goals for per game, but they were allowing more than they were scoring. So the goal differential has improved, but the actual offense itself has not. And to focus in sort of on 5-on-5 first, because we'll get to the power play later, which was also a huge problem tonight. The first 24 games of the season before that December 1st marker, 5-on-5 goals, the Sens were 8th worst with 43 scored and a -10 differential. In the last 23, so not counting tonight because I pulled these stats before the game, they are straight up dead last in the entire league at 5-on-5 goals for with 34. So they've scored 9 less. And,
That's unreal.
And
That's unbelievable.
And the differential at 5-on-5 is now -3. So again, a better goal differential with cutting those goals against. But the goals for just absolutely suffering. And to me, it just seems like this team can only do one thing at a time, either defend or score. It's really funny to me tonight that this was a 1-0 game until the empty net goal, considering the last game against the Bruins was 6-5. So the last game against the Bruins, we couldn't defend worth jack shit. And then today, they do okay on defense, despite some turnovers, and then they can't score. So just what do you think about the 5-on-5 play first specifically that has resulted in scoring even less goals? Do you think it's just that they're focusing so much more on defense, or do you think there's some like key problems with the Sens offense at 5-on-5 that need to be addressed?
I think probably a bit of both. Like at the start of the year, they had the advantage of, I think there's a lot of players on this team that, and I know we say like, the Sens has been a lot of movement, but their core pieces are starting to have been here for a long time now, right? At least like the Chabot, Batherson, Stützle. I mean, can you count Norris because of the injuries? I don't know. Kachuk, all those guys have been playing together for a good bit and know each other. And because of that, I think they got off to such a good start. And the power play drove a lot of their offense too. But strictly speaking at 5-on-5, it could also be a bit of a luck thing. Their finishing was good. And now I wonder if some of it now may be the Travis Green effect. I don't have any specific coaching data on stuff, but it could very much be that they're taking a more defensive approach. And as you said, the results have gotten better in terms of wins and losses, and that could be intentional, right? Playing a more conservative style that results in less goals and maybe something that's more correlated towards success deeper in the season or specifically in the playoffs. But stylistically, in terms of maybe what's leading them astray here, especially recently, I've been looking at a couple of the players that I have in my player cards, and it's like their carry entry volume is going way down, especially since the start of the season. Lots of dump and chase, and that's the thing. Their forechecking numbers are still not bad, and I think they've been really good. Like I know Zach McEwen is currently, I think, taking a leave of absence with Belleville, but when he was up here, unreal forechecker. That guy is unbelievable. Like even just, usually when you think about a fourth line checker like that, you might think, oh, he's going to go in, get his hit, and maybe get the puck. He would go in, grab the puck, and do some no-look backhand pass to start a possession. It was great to have. Yeah. Another guy like that, Noah Gregor, and now that he's injured, you don't have as much of that carrying prowess in the bottom six because, I mean, listen, Noah Gregor's Noah Gregor. He is what he is, but what he does bring is a good bit of speed, and you need that to establish some sort of possession in the offensive zone. And now you're not getting as much of that down low, especially with Gaudette playing up. I know he went back down today. But looking at players and past seasons in terms of their numbers, like for example, Josh Norris, really good skater, right? I've always been a little bit criticizing of him for not using it sometimes fully in transition, all that. But last year, his carry and passing entries were around 70 to 80th percentile in the league. This season, dropped all the way down to 10th percentile carry entries.
Oh, wow.
Brady Tkachuk is another guy. He, coming into the league was very much a power forward, did not have a ton of, speed prowess that he could really use to charge through and really, wrecking ball his way into the zone. But as he developed year over year, I think I'm looking at the numbers right now, it improved by like 15 to 20 percentiles year after year after year from 2020 to 2023-24, when he was 75th percentile in the league in carry entries, passing entries, and 95th percentile in transition offense. You look at this season, he's still getting that transition offense and being very efficient on those entries that he is taking in, but his volume all the way down to 30th. There's so many players. You want to talk about Giroux as well. he's a guy that is getting, we could tell is getting older. And as a result, his ability to carry the puck in, he doesn't have the speed anymore to do that or the quickness. He has to rely more on cuts and delays. And because that puck carrying prowess around him is going down, he's losing the ability to defer on those delays to generate those entries. And as a result, you have way less possessions in the offense. I'm sure once they get established, they can take the time to, create chances. Whether they actually do or not is a different story. But their ability to get into the zone like that, I think, has really diminished this year. And some guy that I was hoping would maybe take that step, who was really raw last year, I think was really Greg. And he hasn't really taken it, for example. Shane Pinto's had a bit of a middling season. It's just all those types of players, even depth guys like Michael Amadio, who has historically been a really good puck carrier just to get into entries. He's not doing anything fancy with that, but his entry volume also gone down. All those types of players are not getting as many carries into the zone, and that's immediately impacting their offense, I think.
Yeah, I really like that stat that you mentioned about the carried entries, because I feel like the Sens really are not generating that much rush offense lately, and that seems to line up perfectly with that stat. It feels like when they are getting offense, it's off the cycle. Like you said, with Giroux specifically not really having that speed anymore, he's always doing like a cutback on the zone entry. I kind of feel like most of the Sens forwards are always doing that. Like anytime they enter the zone, if it's not a dump and chase, if it is a carried entry, they're always cutting back, passing to the point, with varying degrees of success. Like a lot of the Sens shots tonight specifically were just bombs from the point or floaters from the point, even, where they're just cutting back, and that was like all they were doing to try to test Korpisalo. So I don't know if it's like the style or the system specifically that Travis Green has them playing, that I don't know, they're just not getting as many odd man rushes, because you would expect rush offense to come from like 3-on-2s, 2-on-1s and stuff like that. It feels like they don't really generate a lot of those chances. I don't know if the stats line up for that specifically, but that's the feeling that I get.
Yeah, odd man rush is not something I extract from the data I have access to. I know it's tracked in there, so I could at some point take a look, and that's a good thing that I might want to take a look into and maybe post about on Blue Sky or something. But that's the thing, is this used to be the Sens' identity like 2 years ago, is that they were high flying, and they had Tim Stützle and Drake Batherson, and Kachuk was turning into the guy like that. Shabbat's found his form back, and he's probably their only guy who's gotten up in terms of carry entries. But that's the thing, is I still am a big proponent of, using your delays and your cutbacks. Hell, that's my main playing style. When I play beer league, I do not have the speed to dart down. What I'm going to do is dart in. But the problem is, what you do then after cutting in like that is you need other people around you to push the defenseman back and really try to reach for that far post. You can hit them with a low tap in or a screen or some sort of rebound, or just to bring the defenseman so far back that you get enough time to just decide to, okay, I've cut enough, now I go in for my shot. And the problem is, because it's an entire environmental meltdown in terms of that carry entry and that speed through the neutral zone, those options aren't materializing themselves. They're just running into a wall at the blue line, and they're not getting anything done. And that's why they're defaulting to more forechecking, when really they should be tackling this issue head on, because otherwise they won't be able to get anything done.
Yeah, like if they do get a carried entry, they make that cutback, and usually it's like one guy entering kind of with his line mates lagging behind a lot of the time. I feel like that's how the Sens end up getting out of their zone a lot of the time. And then so they make the cutback, and then there really is no one to pass to. Usually it ends up being the the reversal off the boards and in behind the net, and then that's essentially a dump and chase in just a smaller area of the ice. Like, you gained the zone and then you dumped it in anyway, because the other forwards are lagging behind. So I feel like it's a lot of that too, where it's just they're not really in sync as they come across the blue line.
No, not at all. That's the thing. You need more manpower when you're doing plays like that. And even when I look at scouting players, one of the most translatable things that I found is being able to push the defense by using some sort of mix of tools when you're cutting in, whether that's darting across the side, directly attacking the defenseman's triangle, or using your cutbacks and using your teammates when you do that. The problem is, the Sens can't really get there. And I don't really blame them for doing more forechecking, because I do think they have an above average checking toolbox on the team. They have a lot of really strong players that can do that. I mean, they have Brady Tkachuk. Like, that already puts them above average just from that. But yeah, it's The sad part is not only is it driving down their offense, but it's making it dull, which is
Yeah.
really the depressing part about it. And as Sens fans, we've had enough of the team being bad. Please, can we not also have the team being dull? I just give me please give me some entertainment
Yeah,
here.
like I will take the 2-0 wins, the 2-1 wins, as long as we get wins. But man, when you don't win the games and you end up with it's what 5 shutouts, being shut out 5 times in the last 11 games, I think it is, and all of that in January, then it really starts to feel like there's a microscope on the offense specifically. Like even though they're still in the race and they still have a positive record, it's like when that happens, even though you can win the low scoring games, it just starts to feel like it could snowball, right? Where the offense just like turns off entirely. Like that's not going to happen. Realistically, they will be able to bounce back and get some sort of offense soon. We can see that they are able to score in bunches like the previous Boston game where they had the offensive explosions, but just not happening right now. And like I also was digging into some other stats like the Corsi 4 and the high danger chances 4 at 5-on-5. I'm not gonna go and list all the numbers right now, but from the first 24 games to the last 23 games as well, you can assume correctly that both of those have dropped. But overall in the whole league, pretty much those numbers have dropped, specifically the Corsi. So even though the Sens drop a little bit in those stats from the first half of the season till now, it's just more low event games across the whole league, I think, as teams are starting to get more used to playing their coaches' defensive systems and things are just tightening up overall. So I think that plays a part in it too. And the other thing is that the shooting percentage, I should point out as well, it wasn't good to begin with, which is funny that they were scoring a decent amount of goals with a 7.6 shooting percentage at 5-on-5, which was the 6th worst. Since December 1st, it's dropped to a 6.75 shooting percentage, which is the 2nd worst in the entire league.
Woof.
So it's not just the chance creation, but it's also the finishing too when they actually do get those chances.
That's tough. That like I listen, we knew from the eye test that it was bad, but you got to think eventually at some point. Like, listen, it's I know it's all doom and gloom, and the way you were describing the team, like at the start of that whole section, it sounds like we're talking about like the Islanders or something.
I
Which
know, right?
I
It sounds like we should be like
no,
bottom of the league.
if Josh from the Zubcast were here, he would be slapping me for even mentioning that comparison. He hates that team, man. And it's the sad part is, oh, we're not even at least getting the overtime point from it. But listen, we have the shooting prowess anyway to rebound from that. Shane Pinto historically has been a good finisher, and he's just having a horrid finishing season. Things like that are can be very random here and there, and they'll regress back at some point, we hope. um, Tim Stutzla is also, really good shot. We just, we hope he can start using it a little more.
Yeah,
And
that what was it? Was it 39 goals 2 years ago? Was it 39 or
yeah,
34?
yeah, one goalie extended leg and post away from 40 in game 82 against the Sabres.
Yeah, that's such a weird one because I feel like he should be able to get back to that, but also watching him over the last 2 years, and he's been getting better like at his overall game, but it kind of feels it's been so long since that season now that it's like maybe that's just not his game. Like maybe he was just riding an absolute shooting percentage heater in that season 2 years ago, and maybe now I start to wonder if what he's shooting right now is going to be closer to his average.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, this year, actually, I know he's only got 15 goals, but his finishing has been very strong. The problem is he's still getting acclimated to having a healthy wrist, I think,
Right, yeah.
is
He
the
has to
problem. Whereas
remember how to use it to shoot.
exactly. And listen, I've talked ad nauseum on a bunch of different sites, podcasts, whatever, about how it affected his breakout game. But the biggest impact on offense was easily how it completely overshadowed his way of thinking with the puck offensively. And he just couldn't rely on a shot. And that meant he couldn't create for himself, which meant he couldn't use that as a way to kind of put a veil over his passing options, and his whole offensive game collapsed. Yes, he still got 70 points, but we're talking about relative to what we thought here. And so it's taking some time. Now he's got his shot back this year, in my opinion, anyway. His finishing has gone from being around 20th to 85th percentile in the league. Very good.
Okay.
But his ability to get open off puck to be that finisher, the problem is he has the puck so often, so it's usually going to be lower. You see that in players like Nathan McKinnon and Connor McDavid, who have the puck so often they don't really have to worry about being an off puck offensive threat. They're still great at it, but it doesn't happen nearly as often. And their teams as a whole, when they're on the ice, they're not geared towards that. But still, Stützle's numbers on that side are low, and his ability to create with the puck for himself, not just playmaking and all that, and keeping possessions going, but really putting himself in that position to get the shot. Like we saw today, there's a lot of times where he was forcing a high danger pass, which again I don't mind. They just weren't happening today. Versus taking the shot himself, we know he's got such a good shot. I mean, like we remember the first game of the season. Was it the first goal or was it the second? I can't remember if Pinto scored first or if it
I
was
think it was
him.
the first goal of the year, yeah, on the power play
But
there, right?
yeah, from like the pretty far out, like beyond the top of the right circle, and he just absolutely lasered one through bodies. It's like, Tim, you have this shot, buddy. Like once he gets back into it, and I think a lot of the focus this year could also be on his defensive side, and I think we'll get into that later. Um, but if I think it's just a matter of time before he's able to create for himself again. Does he score 40? I think at some point in his career he will. It's just not to the point where after that's like, oh, he might be a 50 goal scorer. I don't know about that anymore, which is the issue because players peak relatively early, right? Like that's
Yeah.
theoretically his peak should be 2 or 3 years from now. So we'll see.
Yeah.
I'm really excited. And listen, we talk about the team being boring. Watching Tim Stützle will never be boring. All right. Whether he's doing some crazy stuff, falling all over the ice, which is always funny, or deking someone else out and breaking their ankles to make them fall. It's a joy to have him on this team, and I'm just happy we get to watch him every game.
Yeah, exactly. Stützle is one of those guys that most of the time, unless he's injured or sick or something, there's a couple games where he was ill this month, he's always going to be doing at least something every game that makes you say, wow. And I'm glad that you mentioned that power play goal early in the season, actually, because that's a good segue into talking about the power play, which was pretty much the Sens' downfall tonight. I think they ended up with 4 opportunities, and the 5-on-3 specifically, where they just really, really didn't generate much of anything other than, like I said earlier, those shots from the point, which was the same thing they were doing at 5-on-5. But I like that you mentioned the Tim Stützle goal at the beginning of the season specifically, because with the power play, to me, it feels like if the Sens don't get the bumper play to Tkachuk on the first unit or to Giroux to Pinto on the second unit that they've done in the past, it feels like if they're looking for that the whole time, and if the other team covers that successfully, it feels like the Sens don't generate any threatening shots whatsoever on the power play at this point. So the Stützle one is a good example of where has that gone, where someone else is actually a shooting threat on the power play, because it feels like the power play is getting very uncreative, getting very lackadaisical, and you see that in the stats as it is just absolutely tanked since the beginning of the season. The first 24 games, the power play, let's see, yeah, it was the 3rd best in the league at 28.1%, and a lot of that was riding a shooting percentage heater. The power play high danger scoring or shooting percentage on high danger chances in that time was the 8th best in the league with 25.7%. Since December 1st, the power play is 16.9%, which is the 7th worst in the league at that time. And the high danger shooting percentage on the power play has gone down to 14.3%, which is the 4th worst. So you go from the 8th best shooting percentage on your high danger power play chances, and you go to the 4th worst. Like, it makes sense that the shooting percentage was going to come down, but going down that far is a problem, to the point where it's not just regressing to the mean. It's going from top 10 in the league to bottom 10 in the league. And I feel like a lot of that is that they're just it's just like we mentioned the shooters, but I feel like they don't have that many great shooting threats on the power play, especially when Josh Norris is not in the lineup, like he wasn't tonight. What do you make of that, where the high danger chances specifically, they're still getting them on the power play, but they're not finishing them now, and it seems like it's regressed farther than you would expect.
Yeah, and the thing is, eighth from the top, given the talent that we have, isn't really outrageous. Like
Yeah,
we could have
exactly.
thought that this could have kept going, right?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's tough because you're right. That bumper play has so much influence over how they conduct themselves on the power play that it completely tunnel visions them into what they want to set up and how they want to funnel passes. And as a result, it just screws them over. Like the only other play that they seem to have are maybe a shot from the defenseman where all they have in terms of traffic is Brady trying to get a tip.
Yeah.
Whereas you compare that to, again, that Timmy shot, if I remember correctly, they didn't have just Brady hoping for a rebound or a tip on the play, which might somehow perfectly go around the goalie. They had established two layers of traffic. And looking at the types of, and I don't, this can't be tracked in public expected goals like we look at, but one of the biggest drivers of expected goal value on any sort of play are layers of traffic in front of the goalie. Anytime that they cannot see what's in front of them, obviously that's going to impact them hugely. But because, in terms of what's available anyway, currently, we don't have that NHL edge data with exact positioning on all of that. But you look at to what Sportlogic and Instat and other companies and in-house what some teams might have, that's easily one of the highest things that can correlate to goals. So I think the Sens don't have that extra veil of addition for goal value, and as a result, I think their finishing on the power play seems a little inflated or deflated, I guess I should say. Like it should be closer to the mean because they're actually not generating as much as they should be, because plays that do have more traffic get lumped in with what they do, but what they try does not have that extra layer. So as a result, it's really hurting their chances. In terms of other plays, I mean, we talked about and yeah, this isn't really possible with Norris injured because you kind of have to shuffle how the units are. But the Giroux on the right side to Pinto high slot play, I've loved for the last however many years. It's been pretty much their only threat on the second unit.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Gaudette's been good on
those
on the
tap-ins
left
at the
side.
back door.
Those tap-ins, hey, he's great. Those are the types of goals that I love and that I've scored my entire life growing up in house league, and you can make a living off those if you really want to. But he's been great at doing that as well. The problem is, yeah, with the instability due to injury, you really don't know what you're really getting yourself into. The one thing I will like to say is I'm not happy Sanderson's injured, obviously not, but the fact that he is gives us a chance to see Chabot back on the first unit, which I think a lot of fans were clamoring for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like it was getting a little bit stale with Sanderson as the quarterback. Again, it just feels like you know what you're going to get from him every time. And I feel like I thought that he was going to become much more of a shooting threat than he has been this season. Like I remember last season his goal total went up quite a bit. And like in the preseason this year, he was shooting a lot, getting some nice goals in the preseason. But since then, like the shooting just hasn't come from him. So like when Sanderson has the puck on the power play, it's like basically all you're gonna get is just him giving it back to Tim Stützle. And it's just I feel like there's not a lot of creativity left there. So yeah, it was nice to get Chabot a look on the first power play unit tonight. Not that it was super successful or anything like that, but it was nice to get a different look for sure.
Yeah, and as you said, like usually he would offload it to Timmy if he doesn't really have much else. The problem is again Timmy not in the shooting mindset for himself.
Mm-hmm.
Giroux never been much of a shooter and he's regressing. Kachuk, he's the net front guy. You're not going to rely on him to do any sort of chances there. And I'd say the one thing that Batherson has regressed at, he's improved everywhere except the power play, which he was unsustainably good at previously. So as a result, you have all your players on your first unit essentially are just unable, or there's something in their game or their play styles that's made it so that they're each less effective on the power play.
Yeah, and I almost feel like it's too many playmakers on the first unit. Like Sanderson, Chabot, they're the setup guys. Stützle is a setup guy, like you said. He's not in that shooting mentality, and they don't put him in a position
should be,
to be,
and he eventually will be.
But they're not really putting him in a position the way they run the power play to be the finisher on any of the setups. Batherson is pretty much a pure playmaker. He gets the goals kind of in bunches. Obviously, it's been a while since he had a bunch at this point. And then Giroux, a pure playmaker. Kachuk's really the only goal scorer, and you were talking about him in front of the net. It hasn't been like as successful as you would expect. So yeah, I just feel like more shooting threats on the power play in general is what they need. And obviously missing Josh Norris is a huge part of that, but even when he has been in the lineup this year, I feel like they don't go to his one-timer option too often. Like I think he has scored that goal once this year. I think it was against Minnesota at the end of December, and we were all like, oh my god, finally they actually did the play. Because this is the thing, it's not that they've been setting Norris up for that a lot and he's just been missing. I feel like they don't even go for it most of the time anymore too. So I feel like part of it is the strategies as well. It's like they don't have very many shooters, too many one-timer threats, and they almost like forget that they even have one in Josh Norris when he's there.
Like even his most iconic goal, from a 1T on a man advantage was
Mm-hmm.
from the center of the ice. Like it was
Yeah.
in or the center of the zone. Like they're not having their power plays engineered towards getting those chances. And I wonder how long it's going to take until the Sens and Alfie and the coaching staff, Travis Green and everyone involved decide, okay, maybe we change how not just how the units are composed with the players, but how they work and what plays we want to try to set up because
Mm-hmm.
it's really getting to the point where you got the bumper play between Batherson and Kachuk, and that's it.
Yeah.
Like it's dire.
And I feel like Batherson does have that one-timer ability. It's just that they don't go for it. Stützle has that shooting ability too, but that's not the play that they're ever trying to set up. So I feel like the
Yeah,
potential is there to turn it around.
exactly. Like Timmy's more of a catch quick drag back shooter, and Batherson is a catch and release with like as a wrist shot or a
Mm-hmm.
snapshot. He's not really a slap 1T guy.
That's
The only
true.
guy you have for that is, I mean, I you could say Pinto as well. And I
Mm-hmm.
would be interested because I think if I remember correctly, I should know this because I watched an outrageous amount of North Dakota hockey when the whole gang was there.
Yep,
But
I
I'm
remember those
pretty sure he
days.
was playing left circle one timer. Like he wasn't
Mm-hmm.
forced into high slot bumper or anything. So I'd be interested to see what happens there because you have a lot of candidates that can play on that side. And I know they've been trying Giroux on his offside there. But if you kept Giroux on his strong side on the second unit, you put Pinto on the left side, or they were both on the first. I don't know what you're trying to do here. You know, you can try whatever at this point. Nothing's really working. I want to see Pinto because maybe that not only breaks us out of our power play slump, but it breaks him out of his personal production slump, and that could really see some boost because there was even a portion of time where, and I know he hasn't been having the best season, but they had him off the power play in favor of Perron and Greg.
Yeah, that pissed me off.
Unbelievable.
Like
Yeah, like
how is he gonna get going again if that's what how you're gonna be deploying him, right?
I don't get it. It's like, listen, you can have one of those guys with them, but I wouldn't have either of those guys ahead of Pinto. Greg hasn't. That's the thing. You could say Greg has not had the greatest season either. Why are you putting him there? I guess you're going net front, but shouldn't you just go Perron net front, Pinto?
Yeah,
Anyway,
yeah. Maybe Perron will make his way back onto that second unit.
mhm.
I don't remember if they had him on there to begin with. Like
They
it
did.
was so
That's the
long
thing is,
ago.
I think he did bring a bit of a unique contribution there because I think he played more of a lower left circle area, which is interesting because they don't really have anyone else who does that as much. Like
Hmm.
kind of like from the Alfie spot as we discussed before we started the show. But listen, any sort of injection of anything at this point is welcome
Yeah.
because you can't lose, you can't get worse, right? Right?
That's
Please.
the thing. They're pretty
No.
much at rock bottom for the season in terms of goal scoring at this moment. So you got to think that it's only up from here. And I think to wrap the segment up, I would say they could use some outside help in terms of offense, but I think there's a lot of potential solutions in the room and like with the current lineup and just sort of trying different things with the players that they have, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like I'm excited to hopefully get a chance. Hopefully, if Norris is not out long, if Sanderson is not out long, just want them to get a chance of having all of those players healthy and draw up some plays. You know, just
Hmm.
you let your mind wander offensively and just try stuff.
Yeah.
That's because there's nothing to lose at this point.
They gotta try new things. I think that's the
Yeah.
key point for this segment here. Before we get into our next segment, looking for ways to help an upstart media company employing over 30 young journalists and analysts across Canada. If you have a few spare bucks lying around, you can head to our Patreon page at patreon.com/thegameovernetwork. There you'll find multiple tiers featuring different rewards and goodies for helping us grow. There's extra access, exclusive looks behind the scenes, Discord benefits, merch discounts, and opportunities to give us feedback. And you can even join us for special shows live where you can interact with hosts as we launch more ways to improve your experience. If you're not able to spare a few dollars, we have a free tier available, so you can still get some perks through that. If you really want to help us, make sure to click like and subscribe on YouTube, rate us 5 stars on your favorite podcast app, and share our work on your social media of choice. Patreon.com/thegameovernetwork. Now, for the third segment tonight, I think just for how the show has gone, I'm going to make this sort of the final segment because we've got a lot in this one, and not too much chat activity tonight as people are not exactly enthused about the Sens scoring
Can't blame
zero
them.
goals, zero goals in the last two games. So I think I'm gonna make this one big final segment here is that Louis has his own stats model and his own stats website, which you can of course check out. It's lbhockey.com, right?
Yeah, exactly. I can post the link in the chat if
For
if
sure.
if the handful of chatters that are still sticking with us. Shout out to you, by the way. If you're staying up at 10:43 p.m. Eastern after that Sens win, listen, your Sens pilled just like us, and I love to see it.
And I'll get the link in the description for the VOD and the podcast upload as well. But yeah, you have got these statistical models here where you've also got the graphics to represent the stats too. So I've just put up the first one on the screen that we're going to take a look at here tonight, which is Tim Stützle and specifically the improvement of his defensive play this season. So this is we've been talking about the Sens being unable to score, but of course they do have that increased defensive ability, and Tim Stützle has really been at the center of it. Even though he's not hitting those insane offensive numbers that he had 2 years ago, the improved defensive play can help this team win games, and it has been this season. So what are we seeing here? If you want to explain the chart there.
Yeah, so this is my player progression viz. It helps you look at any sort of different skills that a player develops or regresses in over a span of the last 4 years. And I here, as you can, there's a bit of a drop down at the top. Obviously, you can select your player top left, but at the top middle, there's different categories. For example, here is shutdown. So the combination of transition defense, which is when you're staying back to help your defenseman as a forward in terms of preventing the opposition from moving forward into the zone, your suppression ability within the defensive zone, ability to mitigate chances, and checking, whether that's through physicality, retrieving pucks, helping in front of the net on either side. And there's a bunch of different combinations you could go for that, whether you want scoring, mixing your passing and your shooting. But yeah, Timmy's defense has gone nuclear this year. I don't know what has happened and what's turned. Probably it's just some focus on that with the coaching staff in this offseason. But as you could see, it's the axis for the main graph here for the line chart is in percentiles. And he's gone from being historically probably around a bottom quarter in the league in terms of shutdown ability, and all of those just together. He's got that Travis Green bump, and they all jumped up together into the 75th percentile roughly, and he's easily becoming an actually good defensive center, which is huge for a guy that has that much dynamic ability. As we can see which skills exactly are driving that. He's gotten really good at immediately stopping pressure in the defensive zone and putting on more shadowing onto the puck and allowing him to disrupt any sort of possessions that the other team might have. His ability to prevent the other team from breaking the puck out and putting more pressure on them there. Not turning the puck over is the thing that's been huge with his wrist now being back to full health. He's got way more confidence on the breakout, and that means he's not turning the puck over nearly as much. And as a result, it's just driving really good numbers. He's not afraid to go into the corners. And all of that is really displayed here with how it's driven him to be just a much better player overall this year. And if he can drive that into, two-way results moving forward on top of continued progress offensively and getting back to, as we said, potentially 35, 40 goal status, that'd be absolutely massive.
Mm-hmm. The thing I like about the increase in Stützle's defensive ability is that, like, when you think about his offensive ability, the best traits for his offense are his skating and his stick handling, and I feel like he's been able to use those two skills for like both sides of the game now, both sides of the puck. Specifically with the skating, he's a one-man breakout. Like a lot of teams will have that defenseman that breaks the puck out, but for us we just give it to Timmy. And the stick handling too with that, he's able to make those little stick handles that where previously I feel like he'd be turning the puck over a lot more, but I feel like he's learned the type of moves that work and the type that don't work, and we're seeing a lot less of those turnovers on the breakout than we did, like, especially last season. So I feel like he's really he's using the skills that are his best traits, and he's been able to apply those to the defensive side of the puck too, in terms of keeping the puck, not turning it over as much, and of course the speed helps with like puck retrievals and back checking and stuff like that too.
Yeah, exactly. Like as you said, the he used to turn it over a good bit, and he had the lowest like puck management score in the defensive zone in my model across the entire season last year.
Was that for the whole league or the
The
team?
whole league, the
Oh,
entire league. It was bad. It was not
wow.
good. And listen, like it's more of a 30 game-ish, 30, 40 game-ish tracked sample set for all the micro stats and the manually tracked stuff. But that's still significant. Like that's not good. By the way, for
Hmm.
defenseman, it was Jacob Chikrin. But
Oh,
that's yeah, it was
so
a tough
that might be
time.
a little bit of a DJ Smith hockey effect too.
Exactly, a little bit of that. But that's the thing is Timmy now, if I pull it up here, in his single season card, which we'll see Shabbat soon. Yeah, it's a strength now. It's gotten like 85th percentile. It's
Wow.
unbelievable how he's just been able to not just get that efficiency just skyrocketing, but also keep up the volume. He's
Hmm.
still retrieving pucks at the exact same high rate. He's still breaking the puck out with the same level of efficiency and turning them into zone entries and exits as often as he always is. And just putting all that together, that's done a huge jump for him in terms of just being able to suppress any sort of chances when he's on the ice because he's getting the puck out so much easily, right? He's not, turning it over and giving the opportunity to the other team to get more chances. So it's been really nice to see, and I'm hoping this is sustained for the rest of his career because if it is, holy crap, we've got a beast on our hands.
Yeah, I think he got a bit of a reputation early on as just like high flying offense only, but he's really rounding out into a two-way player. And also with the card mentioning like the transition disruption, the forechecking as well, I feel like his physical play has gone up this year too. Like his someone keeps posting the stats of like I think it's Kachuk, Stutzla, and someone else who they're like way up in the league in terms of guys who have a certain number of points and a certain number of hits too. And I feel like Stutzla was not really throwing that many hits at all in his career up until this season. Like I remember seeing it a little bit in when he was in Germany and in the World Juniors as well. He had a little bit of a physical edge to his game, but then we didn't see it as much as he came over to the NHL in his first couple of years. But I feel like he's added that element to his game too, which just helps the defensive side of the game too if you're able to use your body effectively.
Yeah, exactly, and that's why the checking's gone up so so drastically here in this dashboard. Like he's I think he's always been, or always in the last 2 or 3 years, I mean, he's been physical. Like for those who have had him in fantasy leagues, he's still getting his hit volume. The problem is how much was he turning that into, puck retrievals, whether
Right.
it was helping him on the forecheck. He was getting those hits, and the Sens were just a very hit heavy team, and they have been. But this year, holy, like he's turning it into retrievals and puck steals whenever he's forechecking, way more than he had at any point in the past. So
Hmm.
I'm just really happy to see it, and I can't wait to see how he continues to develop moving forward.
Yeah. Just out of my own curiosity, I pulled up the hit numbers real quick, and last season, over 75 games, he finished with 100 hits, and this season he's already at 78. So that's trending up quite a bit. You can see the increase in the physical play right there. So yeah, Tim Stützle overall, specifically the defensive play, a huge bright spot for the Sens this season. And speaking of defensive play, we have also got a player card for Thomas Chabot here with lots of different stats here. So the other one was sort of the player progression of how they go from year to year. What do we see on this card here for Thomas Chabot?
Yeah, so these are the single season player cards. I've got data going all the way back to 2020-21 season. So everything is post pandemic. And there's still a bit of an overall track record if you want to see how his the SPAR percent here, which is the percentile of SPAR, aka standings points above replacement. So that's the overall score in my model. A lot of people use WAR. This is just, in my opinion, using standings points is more, it's just easier to understand in a sport like hockey where you're not
Mm-hmm.
relying on winning percentage, you're relying on standings points. So looking at this year, for example, he's on pace to contribute 5.2 standings points above replacement, which is a whole lot for a defenseman, especially who's not necessarily getting those number one minutes anymore. And that's helped him a ton, right? As we could see here, this is easily the most detailed dashboard that I have. There's a bunch of different data points grouped up into a bunch of different categories. As we can see, he's a top 50 player in the league this year, top 3 player on the Sens, almost a top 10 defenseman. And
Yeah.
it's just
Mm-hmm.
been a joy to watch him, right? Like, because he's just got that smooth skating ability back. right? He has been fighting an injury. I think I wrote about this again in the Sens Path to the Playoffs article when I did the defenseman. The first guy I wanted to ride on was Shabbat because he had mentioned that he'd been kind of on and off nursing. I think it was a wrist injury as well, right? Over the last couple years. I could probably go and double check.
I think, yeah, I remember the wrist being injured. He had a few injuries, but specifically the wrist last
Yeah,
season, I remember.
yeah, it was Shabbat divulged that he had been dealing with a wrist issue the last couple of years and finally felt back to 100% there. Obviously, he'd been plagued with a lot of injuries, but that was the one that kind of stayed with him and never fully healed. And as we saw with Timmy, we know that that's really going to help you because it affects your entire play selection and how you roll on the ice. And as a result, his ability to create for himself way back up. His playmaking is still there. He's utilizing his teammates a ton. He's establishing himself as potentially the most important player in the Senators offense with how his influencing plays, how everything is flowing through him and how efficient he's being there. And I think part of the defensive jump for him on the zone defense side, which is in the 78th percentile, and I think that might be the highest it's been in a while for him, is just he's been so good offensively and with the puck that the other team doesn't have as much of a chance defensively, and that's driving a lot of the increase in numbers there. But the fact that he's also back to his past self, being such a good breakout option now again, because I think that had taken a bit of a dip over the last couple of years. You know, he was still skilled, but nowhere near as efficient, and now it's back up. Like I was just hoping to see him back to that peak of like 2021, 22, where he was just all over the ice, one of the best puck carrying defensemen in the game, one of the highest involved or most involved players, and it seems like he's back to doing that. It's just so great, and shocker that it happens now that he's got a proper partner and he's not playing 30 minutes a night. Like, who could have predicted that?
That's exactly what I was gonna say. Is it feels very vindicating for the fan base specifically, and specifically the Thomas Chabot fans, because the number one thing we've been saying ever since Dylan DeMello was his partner is, one, he needs an actual proper defense partner, and two, he needs to not be playing 30 minutes a night. And would you look at that both of those things have come true, and all of a sudden he's just making a huge impact for the Sens. And what's really interesting to me is that if you just looked at the normal stat line of the offensive production, you'd be thinking, oh, he's having kind of like a middling year in terms of, you know, the points that Chabot has been able to put up in the past. But with the advanced stats, he gets such a good offensive rating, which is really interesting to me. I do remember, I can't remember the last time that I looked at the stat, but there was a stat that Chabot was on the ice for the most goals for of any defenseman. Which is funny too, because we were just talking in the previous segment about how the Sens are not scoring 5-on-5 goals at all. So I think that puts it really into perspective too, is that the Sens are so bad at scoring at 5-on-5, especially lately, but Chabot is on the ice when they do score. So what do you think it is that it may not be translating to huge production in terms of the points, but he's still like carrying the play and putting up these big advanced stats numbers for the offense?
Well, one thing that I like a lot about the stats that I track, and this is a huge shout out. If I were ever to give a shout out to anyone for having this project be possible, it's to Corey Schneider from All Three Zones. He runs an absolutely incredible ship over there, and he makes all the data that he manually tracks available. And I've always found that it's been way more translatable in terms of what he tracks and the detail and the type of stats that he tracks to the eye test and what you're seeing happen. And this is why you're able to get way more meaningful stylistic metrics here and there that you might not be able to pull from, you know, what's easily his lowest production pace in the last 4 years, right? Like usually he'd be on pace for low 50s, mid 40s in points, but now I think he's only on pace for 35 or something. And it's probably gone down since today, even given we didn't score. But I think really what's helping him so much is he's historically been a very good driver of offense. Like when he's on the ice, their expected goals for per 60, the rate at which they're generating chances and pressure has always been good. And I think a lot of that is obviously skating is helping him, but he is just so involved offensively. Everything is flowing through him. He's using his teammates a ton, and he's always putting himself in a spot to really help progress any sort of possession towards a shot, or to at least not turn it over. So I think that's been a huge part of his game in terms of just always knowing where to put himself into how he wants any sort of play to continue. that it's really helped his ability to be on the ice for goals, expected goals, and any sort of chance. Sure, it hasn't resulted in any sort of offense this year, but if I look at the badges that I have for him in my other dashboards, he's got the gold breakout candidate badge. Like, he is one of the most likely defensemen to outproduce his current production based on the track data I have on him. So it's only a matter of time if he keeps playing like this until he really sees a jump there. And it's maybe there's some power play stuff going in there like we talked about that could help that jump. But I'm excited to see how his production pace improves over the second half of the season, because there's no way it can go anywhere but up.
Yeah, you're right about the power play too, because Sanderson himself has like 12 power play points or something like that, and then there's the absolute reverse of Chabot, where he's not really on the ice for that many goals for at 5v5, which just really shows Chabot's impact this year, is that if the Sens are scoring, Chabot is out there. And yeah, all these advanced stats can really let you know how a player is doing compared to just looking at the surface level stats. So if you want to see more of these, remember you can go to lbhockey.com, get a subscription over there. He has these for the whole league, right? Pretty much the whole league.
Yeah, as long as they have played like not a small amount of minutes. Like, I don't have I don't know. I don't have any David Perron stats for this season because he's barely played.
Yeah.
But I did make an exception. I think it was last year when Cruikshank had played just a few games and had some managed stuff. I was like, I got to know.
You had to do it for your boy.
Like, I knew it would be heavily regressed, and sure enough, he was like 50th percentile because barely anything was allowed to not be pushed back to the league average. But exactly, that's the thing, is as long as the player has played in the NHL as kind of a regular, you could argue, I got data on all of them from the last 5 years.
Yeah. So if there's any players that you're curious about to do a deep dive on their stats, be sure to go to LB Hockey and check that out. Now, the next one we have is a goalie comparison between Jeremy Swayman and Linus Ullmark. And it's really interesting just on the surface level how this has played out this year, with the two teams being very close in the standings. Obviously, Boston pulling ahead tonight, but they have like almost identical records. And yet Jeremy Swayman has considerably worse stats than Linus Ullmark, which, to be honest, is a kind of a surprise to me. I figured that heading into the season, Ullmark's stats would take more of the dip, playing on a worse defensive team, although they've improved, obviously, which is a huge part of it. And you'd think that Jeremy Swayman would just keep on rolling in Boston, but it's not quite turned out that way, whereas I think Swayman had a really tough start, and so did Ullmark, but Ullmark has really turned it around since then. Swayman, not so much. So what do we see here through your model on these two goalies?
Yeah, so we can see that there's not a ton of differences in terms of their play styles. There's some things here and there, but they have roughly similar shapes, except for Swayman being a much more athletic goalie and Ullmark being way better at anticipating play. The thing is, those are still pretty big differences, but on other aspects, they're fairly close. One thing that I have on these dashboards here is ideal system, and it can be a little wonky. I kind of like to think about it as plus minus in a way where it's really interesting when you look at the extremes, but aside from that, it might not help a ton. But we look at Swayman, and Boston already is his ideal system here.
Yeah, fits like a glove, eh?
Exactly.
Despite
problem
that,
is,
though, that his numbers are down.
Exactly. And I think the big thing for me is going into the season, everybody was talking about how, Sens, watch out with Ullmark because he's never been a full starter. And nobody was, I didn't see much talking about Swayman because he was in the exact same boat.
Yeah, people just kind of assumed that Swayman would be able to handle it just fine, and then with Ullmark, they're
not
like,
Ullmark.
yeah. For some reason, he didn't get the benefit of the doubt as much. Maybe part of that is just because he was moving to the Sens with a lesser reputation for defensive play. But yeah, I don't know. It's kind of funny how that works out.
Yeah, funnily enough, I mean, you can't see it on this one, but if I go and dig into the data, Sens are 10th on Ullmark's ideal system list, which is still not bad at all, right? Because he's recently, anyway, with how they've been playing, and this is current iteration of the Sens, right? The Travis Green Sens, who are allowing, I'd like to say, less high danger chances than the previous regime. And that's good for Ullmark. He's a very good, consistent goalie. And any sort of low danger stuff where he doesn't have to scramble, doesn't have to, face any sort of high pressure and really exert his body and just completely let his ability to think and see the game super well take over, that's really helping him. And as a result, he's able to play really well here. The thing with Swayman, despite having Boston so high up, is that he's got so much more exertion hitting him now with more games having to be played. I don't know if he's had to go through any injuries this year. Maybe that could be playing into that. But like it's cut is, I'd say, his performance almost all the way in half in terms of what he's been able to accomplish, right? Like he's around a league average goalie now, which if you're Boston, you need that to be higher. You need him to be significantly above league average, like he seemed to be on pace for, to be one of those top 10 goalies in the league. Like, when you think about those top goalie echelons, there's really maybe only 6 or 7 that you can count on to be really good every year. And if you're Boston and you want to be able to compete, you need that.
Before the season, I would have grouped Swayman into that category.
Me too.
Of like, so it's taken a bit of a dip. Maybe with the ideal system, there's also just a bit of a factor of the Bruins not executing their system as well. Like the best case scenario, which they have been doing for being so good for the past like decade or whatever, of when their system is clicking as intended. Obviously, that's going to be great for the goalies and specifically Swayman's play style. But they did have the coach firing and all that this year, so their performance has dipped overall, and that definitely plays into the drop in stats for Swayman. One other thing that I'd like to ask about on the card is for both goalies there at the bottom, it's GSAR, which I believe is goals saved above replacement, I would think, per game.
Yes, exactly.
What I'm curious about is obviously Ullmark seems to have a way higher number than that for Swayman, but I'm curious so for example, Ullmark's 0.8, where would that rank? Is that like really high, or like what's kind of the scale for that stat?
Yeah, so this is the way this is calculated essentially is that you try to standardize. You have to imagine like what would be the most normal game that a goalie could have in terms of shot quantity and shot quality, and using all of the faced shot attempts, shots, and expected goals that these faced over a season. You can use their performance on that to scale how many goals they would be expected to stop in an average game, because goalies in different systems are going to face different amounts of all of those. And as a result, you can't really use raw expected goals saved per 60 because goalies might just face more per shot or all of that. But yeah, so for this exact number, it converts almost directly to standings points using essentially a goals per win calculation, which changes over every season depending on how many goals you expect to score in a season and how that translates to standings points. But for Ullmark, I have to go to the multi-year cards actually for this, not the single season. But him stopping around 0.8 gets him very high up, like around 96th percentile, which I think only means there's Hellebuck and Shesterkin ahead of actually Logan Thompson's. Hold on.
He would be there. I'm sure he is.
Yeah, but like, sorry.
So it's top 5 pretty much.
It is top 5. Yeah, top 5, maybe even top 3. Logan
awesome.
Thompson's a curious case because it's just this season for him that's driving that result, whereas on these cards, this is a 3-year average, weighted average.
You were looking at the aggregate of the last few years there.
Exactly, with more weight being put towards the recent seasons, whereas Thompson would be overall might be a little higher, but that GSAR, due to it being weighed and not being as high in previous seasons, it's higher this year for sure.
Yeah,
he's been unreal. I still can't believe he was snubbed by Team Canada for 4 Nations.
Absolutely ridiculous. They showed us a graphic on the broadcast today of like the 6 goalies for Canada, and the 3 guys that they picked were the 3rd or the 4th, 5th, and 6th out of those 6 rankings. So they botched that, didn't they?
Well, they went for Jordan Binnington. Of course they botched it. Listen,
like, oh my god. And like Sam Montembeault has the ability, but just is straight up just not as good as Logan Thompson this year. It's like not even close. Like Logan Thompson is playing himself into in like a Vezina conversation at this point too. So that's a topic for another day. But damn, the goalie evaluations at Team Canada might not exactly be up to snuff. But we've got awesome goalie evaluations at lbhockey.com for sure.
Yes.
And now I think we'll make this the last chart for tonight, as I think my camera's probably only got a few minutes of battery left. But in terms of the hot topic of the Sens not being able to score much lately, this is very poignant as well. This was sort of your idea for what you want to see the Sens do to shuffle their lines, specifically the first line. You think that this would be sort of the ideal setup for the Sens in their current situation and with how these players play. So Tkachuk, Pinto, and Batherson, what makes you think that this is the way to go for the first line?
So I'll dive into what we have on the chart right now and then go over how that relates to some of their numbers they've had in the past. But looking specifically at how we have here is on the center, we have a radar chart similar to the comparison dashboard, but the different colors correspond to which player is contributing the most in each of these aspects. For example, Batherson is in the pink red, which means he's the one that's bringing the most passing, transition attack, and exits to that line. Pinto in the yellow with suppression and the transition defense, so obviously more of the defensive thing. And this is a very, I'd say, prototypical line in a sense that you have Pinto as your more defensively inclined guy to cover. Batherson is your dynamic playmaker who's bringing all the neutral zone value through the transition and the zone exits and the passing. And Brady's that power forward who's going to generate a lot of offense through his ability to get a lot of pucks on net, really drive there, and use his forechecking everywhere. So as a result, you get this sort of power first line as it's automatically designated by the code I've written for it. And we can see the kind of chemistry boost they get together. 1.3 is pretty strong for what we have with these players, and I think really helps them to get to that quote unquote first line, because you might not, Pinto's not a first liner. You would say Batherson is maybe borderline that, Tkachuk is, but putting all those together and how they really fit together as a puzzle really helps bring that up, and I think could be interesting to have. And what really interests me there is I was doing a little bit of diving into the time they've spent together over the last few years, and they haven't spent any time together at all this year. So you look at how they've been doing in previous seasons. Sure enough, it was the second most played line in the entire Sens team last year with 272 minutes together, and they had gotten a 56.6 expected goal share. It's the highest of any line with players that they still have here and played at least 100 minutes. And, especially with Norris being out, then you start wondering, I mean, maybe this is what you roll. And as a result, to fill out the top six, I was thinking you obviously put Stützle with Giroux, and then you can kind of use that sixth spot in the top six. When Norris comes back, you can put him there and give Stützle a shooter, perhaps, while you still have him out. You could kind of use it circumstantially in the sense where if you want more overall value, maybe you put a Mario. If you want to bring more grit or something like that, or potential scoring, you bring Perron, more dynamic offense, you bring Gaudette. You really use that as a sort of X factor spot that can help you fill a top six. And as a result, you get a very nice balanced approach to your offense. And it could really, catch other teams off guard, because you have these different layers of attack through your lineup, and it could really help them potentially break out of their funk there.
Yeah, I like that you mentioned the line last season, because I remembered that when Pinto came back from his suspension, they put him with Tkachuk pretty much right away, but I forgot who the right winger was, and as you said, it was Batherson. And Pinto came back from that suspension doing way better than I think anyone could have realistically expected from him, considering
it was the best stretch in the league.
So many games, yeah.
Easily.
So considering he's in more of a scoring slump this season, it's been running hot and cold for him. Obviously, it's not just throw the guy in the top six and he'll get points. But specifically pointing out, I like this line, having the success last season. I feel like that might be something for them to try to go back to. And yeah, as you said, it's just super balanced. I like the way that the chart is visualized there with showing what each guy really brings to the line, who is the strongest at each sort of important part of the game there. So yeah, I would have to agree that this would be a setup that I'd like to see the Sens go back to. It's been good in the past, and at this point they got to try some new things that they haven't done yet this season. I don't think we've seen much of Pinto with Tkachuk, and also in terms of each guy bringing different elements of the game too, I feel like when they have Stützle and Batherson together, for example, I feel like that's too much of just playmaking and stick handling being their main abilities.
Yeah.
And they kind of
You got to leave some for the rest of the lineup.
Yeah, exactly. So even though Stützle should be your first line center, technically, it's kind of the situation where you would play the first and second lines pretty equally, and Stützle would obviously get the power play time ahead of Pinto. But just in terms of the dynamic of putting three different players together, I really like how this works, because sometimes Stützle doesn't necessarily click. He definitely isn't clicking with Batherson lately. Anytime that they've tried it, just Batherson having one goal in the last 18 games at this point. That's I don't think Stützle and Batherson work together. So I like this setup, and I like the way that your card here has it visualized.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm honestly surprised they just haven't tried it given the success they had last year and how much they played them. Like Pinto only played half the season, and this was almost the most played line on the entire team.
Oh, for the whole season too? It wasn't just like during the games.
No,
he
not
played?
just during that stretch. You look at minutes played at 5-on-5 together, and number one is Stützle Giroux Joseph at 305 minutes. Number two, Tkachuk Pinto Batherson at 272. And then a huge drop to 158 of Tkachuk Norris Giroux. It's not even close. They're in a completely different class of their own.
Yeah, I guess maybe it's just different coaches preferring different setups, but you got to think that Travis Green could take a look at those stats and be like, hey, maybe I should try doing what Jacques Martin was doing there.
Yeah, he may have been cooking with that one. Listen, he's I like what it does for the rest of your top six and how you can kind of build your own second line based on whatever situation you want. Because let's be honest, Timmy can carry his line, and as long as you know what you're doing with him and you're deploying him properly, and that's the thing is Pinto's going to get points just by existing on this line with Tkachuk and Batherson at the very least. And I think it's giving him the best chance because moving forward, you need him to break out of that slump. And if you want to have a chance of playoffs, you need all of your guys running. So I think this does the best, both on the player side, on the team side, and just overall as it descends into the lineup and the impacts there. And even when Norris comes back, as I said, I know they don't like playing him on the wing, but you have three guys that can take draws on a potential line of Norris, Stützle, Giroux. And I think it'd be really interesting. You could have so much skating and athleticism ability between Stützle and Norris there. And you have that dynamic passer with a shooter like Norris who brings defensive effort at the very least. I know his defensive numbers aren't great, but he tries. So that it could be nice to see. Maybe he learned something from Stützle and his defensive improvements there, and he finally establishes himself as a two-way center as well, right? I'd like to see how those two work together, and that would be a direct consequence of having that Tkachuk, Pinto, Batherson line together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love all those ideas, and I think ending on that specifically fits in well to the topic of tonight of how the Sens cannot score any freaking goals.
No.
Before we wrap up, just a quick shout out to Newbie Sports saying, do we think they'll score next game? So next game being the Battle of Ontario, as the Sens host the Maple Leafs. So, oh my God, if they don't score next game, then that's going to be like a real problem. Like right now, it feels like a little blip on the radar, but if it continues into next game, holy crap, especially against the Leafs.
Especially with a potential, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but a potential, given how the playoff seeding has been, could be a future matchup. If they get shut up by the Leafs, it's not going to be a fun time anywhere in the city, man. Mm-hmm. It's gonna be really depressing.
I've been to one Sens versus Leafs game, which was 2 years ago, which was a Leafs 3-0 win. They didn't score. I'm going again on Saturday, so if I sit through another Leaf shutout in the CTC, I'm going to actually become the Joker at that point, I think. So
Sens, honestly, you're brave for going to Sens Leafs games. Yeah, I couldn't.
The only way I can handle doing it is if I go with a friend who's a Leafs fan, which is the scenario both of these times. Because like if I'm just sitting there being like unhappy as a Sens fan with other Sens fans around me and we're surrounded by the Leafs fans, then it just feels really depressing. But at least if I'm with a friend who's a Leafs fan, we can have, the back and forth. And if we do win, then it's like, oh my God, I get to laugh at you. If we do lose, then at least it's like, well,
then leave me alone,
my
please.
Friends are happy, Yeah. So, but that's pretty much the only way that I'll do it. Up until the 2 years ago, I had never been to a Sens versus Leafs game. So yeah, I had been avoiding it for a while.
Yeah, I don't think I've been. I can't even remember a Sens Leafs game that I've been to in person. I can remember the last Sens Habs game I've been to, and I was maybe half the age I am now.
Oh
Like
yeah.
I just don't go to those games because
Yep.
I know it will be so packed with the other team and I just will be miserable. So I can't do it to myself. And I'm honestly shout out to you for being able to make it there, especially with the Leafs friend. I would get so mad if the Sens were losing and my buddy was just there being happy. I just
Oh
oof,
God, yeah.
it's tough.
Hopefully I'll be able to handle it. I think last time that I went was like the first time that I've hit 3 beers at a Sens game. Um, this time I'll be driving, so no drinking. But that probably helped in my ability to get through the experience that
It's
time.
true.
So we'll see how it is sober this time. Hopefully the Sens can actually score some goals and make it not so painful this time. But before we wrap up, just going to say, if you're enjoying the show, you probably want more of this, right? Well, make sure you hit the like button on this video, click subscribe on our channel, and make sure you check the notification bell so you're alerted when we go live. If you're listening to our podcast, please give us a 5-star rating or even write a positive review. And if you really like us, make sure to follow us on your favorite social media platforms. You can find the Game Over Network on Blue Sky at thegameovernetwork.com, which is the handle, which is the URL for the website. That's the Blue Sky handle. On TikTok, Twitter, we are at Game Over NHL. On Instagram, Threads, and LinkedIn, at Game Over Network. And we have, of course, all of our hosts' social medias linked in the description below. Currently, we've got a link to the Zubcast down there, and I will be adding the LB Hockey link for the VOD. Do you want to plug any of your socials?
Yeah, you can follow me at so Louis Boulet, all one word, my name at Blue Sky dot social. You can find me on Blue Sky there. You can find me on Twitter. I don't really post that much there anymore, but because
Yeah, trying to
obvious
weed that
reasons.
out.
Yeah, agreed. It's awful over there. So yeah, you can find me on Blue Sky. You can find the LB Hockey account on Blue Sky. You can find the Zubcast account on Blue Sky. That's pretty much the main place that we post now. So if you want to keep up with any sort of stuff, I usually post, maybe not daily. I'm trying to post more about updates there and any sort of charts. So feel free to follow there and obviously check out the LB Hockey website. It's been a labor of love of mine for a few years now, and I gotta say it's been the best time I've been having in the hockey community for sure. So feel free to check it out if you're a nerd like me and you love your hockey.
Yeah, definitely check out lbhockey.com. It's been awesome to see you be able to launch this now because I remember a couple years ago you were talking about how it's in the works, and I was excited to see how it turns out, and it's awesome. So totally recommend everyone to check that out as well. That'll do it for tonight. Thank you so much for joining me, Louis, and thank you everyone for watching. Click like if you enjoyed, subscribe to the channel if you are not already. Have a good night.